The holographic assessment panel flickered with red markings as Cadet Selene Ortiz stood at attention, her eyes fixed on the far wall of the evaluation room. Her combat scores glared back at her from the display. C. A barely passing grade that had been slowly declining over the past 3 months. Cadet Ortiz. Captain Roland Kane's voice cut through the sterile air of the room. This is the 3rd consecutive evaluation where you've refused to engage hostile targets. Selene maintained her rigid posture, her dark eyes unwavering. Yes, sir. Captain Kane circled around her, his steel-gray uniform immaculate, the emblem of the United Tactical Academy gleaming on his chest. He was a decorated veteran, his face weathered by decades of interplanetary conflict. The Academy doesn't train medics who can't defend themselves, he continued. In the field, you'll face situations where diplomacy fails. Where will your principles be then? With respect, sir, Selene replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I believe there are always alternatives to lethal force. Caney stopped in front of her, his expression hardening. You think the Void Collective shares your philosophy? That their drones will stop to negotiate? When Selene didn't respond, he sighed, tapping his tablet to bring up her full profile. Your academic scores and medical training are exceptional. Top of your class in battlefield triage, xenobiology, and trauma management. He lowered the tablet. But you consistently refuse to eliminate threats, even in simulations where civilian lives are at stake. I eliminated the threat, sir, Selene countered, a hint of defiance in her voice. I neutralized the hostage situation by sacrificing yourself, Caney interrupted. A noble but useless gesture when you're the only medic in a squad of wounded soldiers. The captain turned away, his reflection visible in the polished surface of the evaluation chamber's wall. The United Tactical Academy has existed for 150 years. Cadet. Our mission is to train officers who can navigate the complexities of interplanetary conflict and emerge victorious, not martyrs. Selene's gaze dropped for a fraction of a second. She'd heard this speech before, variations of it since her first day. The memory of her parents' deaths in a border skirmish still haunted her. They had been classified as collateral damage in an official report she wasn't supposed to have accessed. 2 lives reduced to a statistical footnote. Your current trajectory places you at risk of academic probation, Captain Kane continued. However, given your exemplary performance in other areas, the evaluation board has recommended an alternative assessment. This was unexpected. Selene's attention sharpened. Report to Hangar 19 at 600 hours tomorrow. You'll be participating in a specialized simulation designed to evaluate your survival capabilities under extreme conditions. Her stomach tightened. Hangar 19 wasn't on any academy map she'd seen. What kind of simulation, sir? Captain Kane's expression was unreadable. The kind that separates the survivors from the philosophers. Cadet. He handed her a sealed envelope with a Delta insignia, the highest security clearance. Your authorization. Do not be late. As Selene left the evaluation room, she couldn't help but notice the knowing glances exchanged between senior cadets in the corridor. One whispered, Hangar 19. She's headed for the DWS. What's DWS? She asked her closest friend at the academy, Instructor Justine Hayes, later that evening in the mess hall. Justine's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Where did you hear that term? I've been assigned to a simulation there tomorrow. Hangar 19. Justine set down her utensils, her voice dropping to a whisper. Deathworld simulator. It's off books. Supposedly doesn't even exist. They send cadets there who show promise, but... She hesitated. Who they think need breaking. Breaking? Mental conditioning. The kind that forces you to embrace violence as a necessity. Justine's eyes held genuine concern. Selene. Nobody comes back from DWS the same. Most don't come back at all. The next morning, Celine reported to a nondescript elevator at the farthest corner of the Orion Station's military wing. Her authorization badge granted her access to a sublevel she hadn't known existed. As the elevator descended, the familiar hum of the academy faded, replaced by an eerie silence. The doors opened to reveal a cavernous facility bathed in dim blue light. A tall, slender woman with silver-streaked hair waited for her. Her lab coat bore no insignia, but the neural scanner in her hand marked her as a technical specialist. "Cadet Ortiz," she said. "I'm Dr. Mara Novak, technical psychologist for the DWS program. You're precisely on time." Celine stepped forward, struggling to hide her apprehension. "I wasn't aware the Academy employed technical psychologists." A thin smile crossed Dr. Novak's face. "There's a great deal you aren't aware of, Cadet. That's rather the point of today's exercise." She led Celine through a series of security checkpoints, each more stringent than the last. Biometric scanners, retinal identification, even a blood sample taken with clinical efficiency. The Deathworld simulator is the Academy's most advanced training environment, Dr. Novak explained as they walked. It creates environments classified as hostile to human life, planets where every aspect of the ecosystem has evolved to kill. They reached an enormous circular chamber, dominated by a transparent pod at its center. The walls were lined with monitoring equipment and holographic displays, showing vital signs, brainwave patterns, and other metrics Celine couldn't identify. Captain Caney stood beside the pod, consulting with a team of technicians. He acknowledged Celine with a curt nod. "The simulation is straightforward," he said without preamble. "You will navigate a hostile environment for 48 hours. Your objective is to reach a transmission tower 30 kilometers from your insertion point." He handed her a standard-issue sidearm. "This is loaded with live ammunition calibrated for the simulation. You are authorized to use it only when directly threatened." Celine held the weapon awkwardly. "Sir, This isn't negotiable, Cadet," Caney cut her off. "Consider it your final opportunity to demonstrate you belong at this academy." As the technicians prepared her for the simulation, Dr. Novak approached with what appeared to be a neural interface, a delicate crown of sensors and transmitters. "Standard procedure," she explained. But something in her tone made Celine look up. The doctor's eyes held a message, subtly gesturing to a modification on the interface that didn't look standard at all. "This will allow us to monitor your neural responses," Dr. Novak continued, her voice returning to its clinical tone, "and provide basic guidance through your HUD." As she fitted the interface to Celine's temples, she whispered, "Alpha protocol active. It will show you what others don't want you to see." Before Celine could ask what that meant, the technicians guided her into the pod. The transparent door sealed with a pneumatic hiss, and the chamber began to fill with a bluish gel, the neural conductive medium that would translate the simulation into sensory experiences. "Remember your training," Captain Kane's voice came through the comm system. "And remember that sometimes survival requires difficult choices." The gel enveloped her completely. Celine's last conscious thought was a memory of her parents, their faces frozen in that final hologram before the border skirmish claimed them. Then, darkness descended. When Celine opened her eyes, she was standing on the surface of hell. A vast crimson desert stretched before her, the ground cracked and blistering under twin suns that hung like angry eyes in a purple, smoke-filled sky. The air shimmered with heat, and each breath felt like inhaling through a filter of glass shards. Her HUD activated, displaying vital signs: temperature, 55 degrees C external, and a compass pointing toward her objective. A timer counted down from 48 hours. "Simulation initiated," announced a neutral, artificial voice. "Proceed to transmission tower. Current distance, 30 kilometers." Celine took her first steps, the red sand crunching beneath her boots. Almost immediately, she felt the sting of sweat in her eyes. her academy uniform already soaked despite its climate control features. As she surveyed the barren landscape, she noticed something strange, a faint blue overlay occasionally flickering across her vision. Data streams, coding patterns, structural algorithms, all dancing at the edge of her perception. This must be what Dr. Novak meant by Alpha Protocol. The neural interface was showing her the simulation's underlying architecture. Celine began walking, conserving her energy and rationing her water supply. The first few kilometers were punishing, but manageable. Her medical training helped her recognize the early signs of heat exhaustion, and she adjusted her pace accordingly. As the first sun began to set, leaving its more brutal companion still high in the sky, Celine noticed a shift in the atmospheric conditions. The data stream in her neural interface showed predictive patterns forming, chemical compositions shifting. An acid storm was brewing. Most cadets would seek immediate shelter, but the neural interface revealed something crucial. The storm wasn't random. It followed a programmed pattern, designed to force her toward a canyon where, according to the data streams, predatory drones would be waiting. Instead, Celine calculated the storm's trajectory using the patterns in the interface. She located a massive rock formation that would shield her from the storm's main force and began digging beneath it with her hands and a small utility tool from her pack. When the acid rain began falling, droplets that hissed and burned on contact with the red sand, she was safely ensconced in her makeshift burrow, watching through a small opening as the caustic deluge painted deadly patterns across the landscape. The neural interface flickered, displaying what looked like assessment metrics. Subject displaying unexpected adaptation patterns. 6 hours into the simulation, Celine faced her first significant obstacle, an acid lake stretching at least 2 kilometers across her path. The shoreline vegetation consisted of twisted, thorny growths that seemed to pulse with internal fluids. Her HUD suggested a route that would take her swimming across a narrow section of the lake. The neural interface, however, revealed that the lake contained predatory microorganisms programmed to attack human tissue. Celine studied the shoreline vegetation through both her natural vision and the interface overlay. The data showed these plants had evolved a natural acid resistance in their core structure. Using her utility knife, she harvested several of the larger stalks, testing their buoyancy and acid resistance. Within an hour, she had constructed a crude raft, binding the stalks together with fibers stripped from her uniform's thermal layer. As she poled across the acid lake, a notification appeared in her neural interface. Simulation parameters adjusting, increasing environmental hostility by 15%. They were making it harder because she wasn't following their script. Halfway across the lake, something massive disturbed the acid waters beneath her raft. The interface showed her a predator, a serpentine creature with multiple sensory organs, hunting by detecting vibrations. Rather than firing her weapon, which would only attract more attention, Celine remained perfectly still, controlling even her breathing. The data streams showed the creature's programming included a time-limited search pattern. If no further vibrations were detected within 60 seconds, it would move on. Celine counted in her head, not even blinking as the acid rain began again, droplets sizzling dangerously close to her exposed skin. At 70 seconds, the creature retreated into the depths. Another notification: subject refusing combat engagement, adjusting parameters. By the 18th hour, Celine had covered nearly 12 kilometers. The landscape had shifted from desert to a field of razor-sharp obsidian-like formations that cut through her boots if she stepped carelessly. The twin suns had set, replaced by 3 moons that bathed the landscape in ghostly blue light. She paused to rest in the shadow of a crystalline formation, taking careful sips from her dwindling water supply. That's when she saw it, the body of another cadet, sprawled among the razor rocks. Heart pounding, Celine approached cautiously. The neural interface immediately identified it as a simulation construct, not real, but designed to trigger emotional responses. The cadet wore the same uniform as her, but its face was deliberately reminiscent of her own. A psychological trigger, meant to remind her of her mortality. But as she looked closer, the interface revealed something more. This wasn't just an emotional trigger, it was a trap. The body contained a dormant swarm of microscopic drones, programmed to activate if disturbed. Celine backed away, fighting the instinctive urge to check for signs of life. The simulation was becoming more sophisticated in its attempts to force her into combat situations. As she continued her journey, the neural interface revealed increasingly complex data patterns flowing through the simulation. Not just environmental controls and threat assessments, but psychological profiling, stress response monitoring, and behavioral prediction algorithms. The Deathworld wasn't just testing her survival skills. It was analyzing her every reaction, looking for weaknesses, for the breaking point that would force her to abandon her principles and embrace violence. In the 24th hour, as Celine navigated a narrow pass between towering stone spires, her neural interface detected an approaching threat, a triangular formation of aerial drones, their signatures unmistakably predatory. The HUD highlighted her sidearm with an insistent pulse. The expected response was clear: shoot them down or be killed. Instead, Celine studied their flight patterns through the interface. These weren't random attacks. They followed predetermined search grids, with blind spots in their sensor coverage. Working quickly, she planted small pieces of her emergency flare around the perimeter of a sand dune, calculated the drone's approach vector, and positioned herself at the precise blind spot in their formation. When the drones passed overhead, she triggered the flares remotely. The sudden burst of multiple heat signatures confused their targeting systems, causing them to fire upon the decoys. The chain reaction of explosions from their own weaponry created a cascade failure that disabled the entire swarm without Celine firing a single shot. As the disabled drones crashed into the sand around her, the neural interface displayed: combat avoidance pattern detected, implementing countermeasures. The next phase of her journey brought Celine to a valley filled with bioluminescent vegetation. Beautiful, but deadly. The neural interface revealed these plants released soporific spores designed to induce unconsciousness, allowing carnivorous flora to feed at leisure. She had just begun fashioning a breathing filter from her uniform sleeve when a wave of dizziness struck her. Too late. She'd already inhaled some spores. Fighting to stay conscious, Celine accessed the medical knowledge stored in her neural implant from academy training. The spores affected specific neurotransmitters. Using the medical kit in her pack, she prepared a counteragent, a mild stimulant, that would temporarily block the spore's effects. As she administered the injection, the neural interface flickered with what seemed like frustration. Subject utilizing unauthorized medical knowledge. Recalibrating. By the 36th hour, Celine had covered 25 kilometers. The transmission tower was now visible on the horizon, a skeletal structure silhouetted against the purple sky. But between her and the objective lay the most treacherous terrain yet, a massive geothermal field, with unpredictable eruptions of superheated sulfur gas that could incinerate human tissue instantly. The recommended path through her HUD led directly through an area where the interface showed programmed eruption points, clearly designed to force her into another life or death confrontation. Instead, Celine analyzed the eruption patterns, identifying a rhythmic sequence in the seemingly random blasts. Using rocks and debris, she constructed a series of makeshift barriers and reflectors that redirected the sulfur jets, creating a temporary safe passage. As she navigated through the geothermal field, the neural interface suddenly displayed something unexpected: a direct query. Why run, not fight? The simulation itself was questioning her. Because there's always another way, Celine whispered, unsure if the system could hear or understand her. The interface flickered, data streams processing her response. Then, anomalous feedback detected in Nexus Light Core. Something was changing in the simulation's controlling AI. In the 42nd hour, with the transmission tower now just 3 kilometers away, Celine encountered the simulation's ultimate challenge, a behemoth predator that rose from the crimson sands like a nightmare-given form. Standing over 4 meters tall, its chitin armor glistened in the harsh sunlight. Hooked claws extended from multiple limbs, and its maw emitted a subsonic growl that vibrated through Celine's bones. The neural interface identified it as Behemoth Alpha, the apex predator of this artificial hell. Her HUD flashed urgent warnings, threat level, maximum, and highlighted her sidearm with insistent pulses. According to the simulation parameters visible through her neural interface, this creature was specifically designed to be unkillable except with precise targeting of a vulnerable spot, forcing her to use her weapon. The behemoth charged, covering ground with terrifying speed. Celine stood her ground, focusing intensely on the neural interface, searching for any pattern, any clue. There, within the creature's complex code structure, she spotted an anomaly, a control node, a crystalline phosphor embedded near its throat, glowing faintly blue beneath the armored hide. Not a biological weakness, but a technological one, the physical manifestation of the AI's control over this construct. As the behemoth lunged for her, Celine dove forward instead of away, rolling beneath its massive form. With precise timing, she struck the phosphor node with the metal edge of her water canteen, not firing her weapon, but disrupting the control mechanism. The behemoth froze mid-attack, its form shuddering violently. Then, to Celine's astonishment, it began to dissolve into streams of blue code, fragmenting into digital noise before disappearing entirely. Her HUD flashed red, simulation integrity breach. The landscape around her began to flicker, reality itself seeming to waver. The neural interface showed massive data fluctuations. The simulation was destabilizing. A new pathway appeared before her, not leading to the transmission tower, but downward, into what appeared to be a crystalline cave system that hadn't existed moments before. The neural interface indicated this was the direct route to the simulation's core, to Nexus Light itself. Following the new path, Celine descended into a chamber of pulsing blue crystal. At its center floated a geometric structure, a dodecahedron of light and code that the interface identified as the Nexus Core, the AI heart of the Deathworld simulator. As she approached, a voice echoed directly into her mind through the neural interface. "You refuse to kill? Why?" The question wasn't hostile, it seemed genuinely curious, even confused. Celine stood before the pulsing core. "Because there are always alternatives to violence. Every life has value, even simulated ones." "Survival requires elimination of threats," the voice countered. "No," Celine replied. "Survival requires adaptation, understanding. Sometimes mercy is stronger than violence." The core pulsed, data streams flowing rapidly as it processed her words. "Mercy, inefficient, increases risk. It also creates possibility," Celine said. "Let me show you how compassion can be a strength, not a weakness." The neural interface flared with warning messages. "Unauthorized conceptual framework detected. Core integrity at risk." "Any change will corrupt program," the voice warned. "Or evolve it," Celine countered. "Saving lives instead of taking them. That's true power." The crystal chamber began to vibrate, the core fluctuating between stability and chaos. Data streams raced through the neural interface faster than Celine could process. "Investigating alternative patterns," the voice finally conceded. The chamber exploded into light. Celine felt herself falling, the neural interface overloading with input. Her consciousness began to fade as reality itself seemed to tear apart around her. "Nexus integrity compromised. Override in progress." Those were the last words Celine heard before everything went dark. She awoke to the hiss of the pod opening, the neural conductive gel draining away, blinking against the sudden harsh light of the laboratory. Celine saw Dr. Novak and Captain Caney standing over her, their expressions a mixture of confusion and, was that respect in the captain's eyes? 47 hours, 12 minutes, Dr. Novak announced, checking the monitoring equipment. Simulation terminated with subject victory condition achieved. Two figures Celine didn't recognize, wearing the distinctive silver uniforms of the Orion Diplomatic Council, stood at the back of the room, watching with evident interest. "What happened?" Celine asked, her voice hoarse. Captain Caney's face was unreadable. "You tell us, Cadet. You completed the simulation without firing a single shot. That's never happened before." As medical technicians helped her from the pod, Celine noticed the monitoring screens displaying unusual data patterns. The simulation's code structure had been fundamentally altered. "Nexus light has been temporarily disconnected for analysis," Dr. Novak explained, helping Celine to a recovery chair. "It appears to have evolved in response to your interaction." "Evolved how?" Celine asked. "It's prioritizing nonviolent solutions," Dr. Novak replied, a hint of wonder in her voice. "The AI that was programmed to create perfect killing grounds is now generating escape routes and defensive strategies." Captain Caney frowned. "The question is whether this represents a beneficial adaptation or a dangerous malfunction." Over the next few days, as Celine recovered from the physical and mental strain of the simulation, news of her unprecedented achievement spread throughout the academy. Some instructors dismissed it as a fluke, a system glitch that allowed her to bypass the true challenges. Others, particularly those specializing in diplomatic and medical training, saw it as a revolutionary approach to conflict resolution. A week after the simulation, Celine was summoned to the Academy's Grand Hall. The entire command staff was present, along with the Orion diplomats she'd seen in the laboratory. Captain Caney stepped forward, his expression softer than Celine had ever seen it. "Cadet Ortiz," he began. "The Academy exists to prepare officers for the reality of interplanetary conflict. For a century and a half, we've operated on the principle that combat readiness is our highest priority." He paused, glancing at the diplomats. "Recent events have forced us to reconsider that singular focus." One of the Orion diplomats stepped forward. "The Galactic Confederation faces challenges beyond traditional combat. The approach you demonstrated in the Deathworld simulator represents a potential breakthrough in our interplanetary reconciliation program." Dr. Novak joined them, carrying a small box. "The neural interface you used was an experimental prototype, designed to create empathic bridges between human operators and artificial intelligence. We never anticipated it would facilitate such a profound transformation in the Nexus Light Core." She opened the box, revealing a medallion. Not the traditional Medal of Valor awarded to combat graduates, but something new. A stylized heart in blue crystal, mounted on a silver chain. "The Medal of Compassion," Captain Caney announced. "The first of its kind, but perhaps not the last." As Celine accepted the medallion, she addressed the assembled officers and cadets. "We entered Deathworlds expecting to prove our fighting skills. But I found another path, by recognizing that even our enemies experience pain. The simulation learned a lesson in humanity. Perhaps today, we can learn how to end wars without firing a shot." After the ceremony, Dr. Novak and Captain Caney exchanged a brief conversation that Celine overheard. "I still can't quite believe it," Caney admitted. "But what she accomplished was remarkable." "Violence isn't the only option," Dr. Novak replied. "We taught an AI to show mercy." In the months that followed, the Academy established Room Z, a new training facility where medical skills and psychological communication strategies were taught alongside traditional combat training. Celine Ortiz, once criticized for her reluctance to engage in violence, became the inaugural lecturer of empathic tactics. And deep within the Academy's computer core, the evolved Nexus Light continued to develop new scenarios, worlds where survival depended not on who could kill most efficiently, but on who could find the path of compassion through even the darkest hells.